Welcome to the Dragonlance Saga Hangout. It is Lenara's Pale's Wealth the 27th. My name is Adam, and today I'm being joined by three gentlemen from the Nexus. Chuck, John, Trappist. How you guys doing?
Hey, guys.
Good.
Terrific.
And we're here to shit all over a new book. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, God.
So, let's just sort of dive into that because I think that's going to be a conversation that spirals out to a broader topic that Chuck and I were sort of brainstorming here. Hey, Jeff, thanks for tuning in live. And anyone else after the fact, if you're joining in live, put in YouTube chat what you thought of Dragons of Fate or any of the new novels. And just if you have any disagreements with what we have to say, let us know. We'd love to have an open conversation with you about your perceptions of Dragonlance and all that entails. So, anyone have any opening thoughts about Dragons of Fate? Love it? Like it? Want more of it?
I liked it. I thought it was fun. I thought it was an improvement over the first one. I do think it wasn't quite balanced on characters, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think my one critique of this is Destina. And, you know, the first novel, we see her and you're like, okay, she's all right, maybe a little spoiled, you know, but she's all right. And then she goes downhill and you don't want to hang out with her at all. I mean, she's just, you know, becomes something that she, you know, becomes something that you don't like, you know, and on purpose. And in this novel, there's a lot of spotlight like on Raceland and Sturm, and understandably so with the themes going on in this novel. But I didn't feel like Destina got a chance to shine or grow very much.
Yeah, she was pretty much absent for the majority of the novel.
And when she wasn't, she was waiting for tasks.
Yeah, which was also another interesting choice. John, what did you think about Taz in this novel?
He's better in this one than the first. Even though he was absent, I do kind of like the Dragonlance that he went off to find, and that's he swears that that's the Dragonlance they were looking for. Right. So I like that. I thought it was funny. I guess it served its purpose. My motto for this book would be, if you haven't read The Legend of Huma, this would be a great book.
Right.
If you have, then sorry, Mr. Knack, but it kind of shits all over your story.
Actually, I have a theory on this.
Oh.
Think of the River of Time, and if you look back at Legends of Twins, which we did for the D20 era, we talked in there about 6 alternate timelines. The River of Time forks. So as it goes on, you know, you've got one fork, which is the Weis and Hickman Huma timeline, and another fork, which is the Legend of Huma. Alternately, it can be explained in terms of, think of like King Arthur, right? King Arthur has so many legends and stories about him, and none of them are quite true. So that might be the case here as well. You know, we've got the Weis and Hickman legend, we've got Knack's legend, and so on.
But does King Arthur always include the same characters? Surely there's always Lancelot and a Guinevere, and there's no Kaz. There's no.
I miss Kaz.
The location was different, and it just seems like it was for no reason other than they didn't want to use somebody else's version of a story.
Do you think that's what it was? That they didn't want to use Knack's stuff? They wanted to keep it all just their own original?
I feel like it. I don't know, of course, but it's just that they wanted to keep it in their own universe and not be beholden to somebody else's story, I guess.
Right. Well, what do you think, Chuck?
About the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, my feelings on the book, it's fine. It's a fine read. It's got some issues with locations and plots and details. It doesn't line up with other Weis and Hickman resources. I mean, they list references in the back, but if you look in those references compared to what you have in the book, it's apples and oranges types of comparisons,
Right.
which is bad. I mean, maybe book 3 will fix what happens, and solve this. But even go back to book 1, there was a lot of what you would call errors made compared to like Dragons of Winter Night from book 1.
Yeah.
So I mean, these aren't new things coming up. It's been consistent so far that even before they time traveled, you know, when they talked about the nightly orders, they went against the nightly orders they established themselves in book 1, 2, and 3 in Chronicles.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there was even. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I say there's even inconsistencies just in like the Lost Chronicles when comparing it to the Chronicles. So this does seem to be a tradition of theirs.
Yep. So I mean, I kind of expect it to happen, and you kind of just roll with it. It gets kind of frustrating when you're, you know, you spend 20 years researching a fantasy world and learning its history, and then you start being like looking at me like, well, is it all correct? Is it all wrong? Do we just throw everything out and just make up whatever as the truth? I mean, even the rules of time travel, this book don't mesh up with the rules of time travel from Legends or Dragons of the Vanished Moon. Like, it's like, like just give me a consistency with the same set of authors, even.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, granted, it's been nearly 40 years, but at the same time, you know, if they're anything like me, they think about Dragonlance like a lot, you know, and they have to know their own material when talking with fans. So I don't know.
Well, and they have a consultant that they could fall back on.
I think that's the worst part of all of it. Is like I would feel bad if I was him because he's being like called out, like everyone's pointing at him like he's the one that kept us on track. He's the one that, you know, the reason why this story shaped out the way it is. And he's just like, no. Like, I would love to talk to him and just ask him, like, did you try to correct things? Did you just not know? Like, how can you reconcile and or justify the wild inconsistencies throughout these two novels with everything that preceded it? Because that tells me that you're not an expert, or they didn't listen to anything that you suggested to change, and then they still claimed that you had a hand in shaping out the story. You know, it's very strange. I don't know.
You know, I don't like criticizing individuals at times, and there's stuff that we don't know from behind the scenes. You know, were there little things that that Weis and Hickman put in place as kind of a you know, like a red herring to say, oh well, that's not right, and you know, what if the story actually started in an alternate reality and we didn't know? You know, there's things like that, and I try to be fair, and I try to criticize works and not people, and that's just me. But yeah, you know, because like I've seen Gene Raby get beat up on quite a bit for the Dragons of a New Age trilogy, and you know, I've met Gene. She's a wonderful woman, just really nice person, and doesn't deserve all that hate. And people don't understand that she was under a lot of editorial direction and influence, and so you know, there's stuff behind the scenes we don't know here. Now, also being fair, you know, there is 40 years of Dragonlance materials out there, and a wiki, and so there's plenty to reference. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I do want to sort of put this out there as a sort of a blanket statement for arguably anything that I ever discuss on this channel in any sort of format, is that we should never be attacking individuals for anything. I think criticism is fair, especially when you're involved in helping produce or create something. But from an individual point of view, like, be your best version of you, and that's I don't doesn't matter to me. Like live your life, and I'm not going to judge you as a human being. I'm just going to judge you through the creative works that you're presenting. So, I still desperately love Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman as authors, even if I don't agree with choices that they make. But they've been facing criticism since Sturm, all the way back. So it's not as if they're not used to making editorial choices that, consciously or not, affect readers. I mean, and so I guess maybe this is a good turning point to sort of alter the course just briefly here of the conversation. Are we being unfair when we criticize the novels when we have no hand in creating them? What do you guys think?
I think that's a tough one to say, because you're presented a work of someone's work, and they're presenting it as even when you read through the table of the synopsis in the front of the book, it doesn't actually match with what the story is about. So if I'm being sold this bill of goods about what's happening in these stories, but yet when I read the story, that bill of goods that was the synopsis of what's happening in these events is nothing, not the main points of the story, I feel we've had some miscommunications, some sort of issues with that. So sometimes it comes down just how marketing works with these books too. I mean, if it's being marketed in a way that makes sense, like, we're revisiting a world and this is an alt world or not an alt world, like, I think as a reader, I'm entitled to know just a little bit, a nugget of like truth there. Because if I don't have that any information to base anything on, I'm going to base it on what I already know, which is 40 years of history.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because while I disagree with some of the choices that Disney's making with Star Wars, for example, at least they did straight up say, all of that is Legends. We're going to do our own thing from here on out.
Right.
Like it or not, at least that was a statement made. In this particular case, the only sign we got of that is the Classics reference on top of the old school logo. And so that arguably should give us a clue that, okay, they are going to be deviating. I thought it meant they're going to be deviating from what WotC's doing moving forward. I didn't realize that they're going to be deviating from their own stuff.
Well, okay, so I'm glad you brought that up, because I have a theory. And it's just a theory. I might be overthinking this, but as I'm prone to do. But my theory is that with chaos involved and you have all these timelines, you're going to land up with a series of different timelines. One will be pure Weis and Hickman. One could be like a Legends with the other classic authors, because let's face facts, unless something changes, we're not likely to see the other authors return with new novels anytime soon, which is a shame.
Yeah.
You could have a separate timeline then for what WotC's putting out gaming-wise, and then so on and so forth, to where everybody's individual game is another timeline. And we've seen stuff like that with The Legend of Zelda, for example. There's like 2 or 3 different timelines there. So it's possible we may be getting multiple timelines, and the only ones actively being supported would be Weis and Hickman's, and then WotC's, and with the note that the Dragonlance books that have come before are quote unquote Legends.
Right. But
Yeah,
to Chuck's,
where's the note?
Exactly. I mean, to Chuck's point, is that a huge marketing blunder? Not, I mean, we're 2 out of 3 books in, right? At some point, we should know that by now. Like it should be a statement in there, or whether it's in the preface or whether it's in an interview or whether it's just the authors straight up saying it. Like they should let us know that that's the case, rather than having us just have to speculate and make up justifications for the choices they make, right? I mean, I guess okay. So here's the next big question:
When do they have to let you know?
Or do they? Like, because we're fans and we're obsessive about it, we want to know. But are authors, like, are they incumbent to tell us anything? I mean, do they have any reason to feel like they should explain their work to us? Anyone want to tackle that?
Well, I mean, as paying customers, you would think that you would, maybe run something by them. But then again, maybe it's not supposed to be set out until perhaps the 3rd book is out, and then they can reveal everything.
Right.
Maybe that's part of the plan. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's just this is what it is, and you're gonna read it and you're gonna like it. If not, then oh well. You've paid for the book, or you've gotten it from your library. You've spent the time reading it or listening to it. Regardless of how you feel, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess they're not beholden or obligated to share any information. But with the authors being as beloved as they are through so many years and so many different worlds that they've been in, you would think that they'd, maybe hint at it a bit. If it's going to change something drastically, that there'd be a, hey, this might not be what you're expecting, or we're changing some things that were written by other authors. So a simple one line at the start of the book, such as that, could have eliminated a lot of questions and emotions.
So as fans, Chuck, do you think we're too close to this stuff? We're too emotional about it? Should we just be more casual and not care so much?
I mean, as fans, should we not care as much? I mean, the world of Dragonlance needs every fan it can get. I mean, that's flat out honest there. I mean, it's a world that, for almost 15 years, sat pretty dormant.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't anything coming out. There was no new information. So the fans we had were fans of the setting. And I think, sometimes you have to remember that those fans, you want to keep a next generation going of fans. You're looking at 3rd generation Dragonlance fans at this point.
Right.
And how are they learning about Dragonlance at this point? Well, unfortunately, mainly from their parents. Because it's not, with a new book coming out, we actually have a new source of way to get fans into the setting.
Or WotC.
What's that?
Or WotC.
Or WotC?
Yeah. Through the game stuff?
Yeah.
That's what I say with the new book. Like I was thinking of the adventure book. You actually have a chance for new fans to come into the setting with that, and then to read these novels. But until then, most of the average age of a Dragonlance fan, I would guess, would have been 40s or 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not a young group. If you look at here, the baby of us is probably me. and I'm no baby, so.
So I got gray hair there.
Going to the chat briefly here. Chris, thank you so much. Good to see you. Gold Moon, it's always great to see you. Thanks for tuning in. What is up, Dom Dynamite? Guten Abend from Germany. Good to see you. Free Latveria. How you doing? Thanks for tuning in. Let us know what you guys think about this novel and the topics that we're discussing here about the authors and the world that they create, and then deviating from it intentionally or not, and whether or not fans should feel justified in their upset with it. So Jeff makes a mention here. Didn't Weis say that the variation of the stories is just different ways it was told throughout history? And I would append to that, is that just a lazy excuse for not knowing details? So what do you guys think? Anyone want to jump on that?
I don't know.
It's
That
King
that
Arthur.
feels like a potentially lazy thing, and the same as well as the gray gem and chaos is involved. That could change things. Again, that just seems kind of an overused trope at this point for Dragonlance. That they can do anything because gray gem.
Right.
But there's also the fact that if you ask Margaret herself, she says she doesn't read other people's fantasy. She might not have ever read Legend of Huma. She don't know how the story goes. But other people working on the project definitely have, and should have had some input on the project as it matured and advanced and got written and edited and all the other steps that go into publishing a book. The knowledge is there, even though if it's not firsthand, the knowledge is out there. It's easy to find. It's easy to talk to somebody that knows the knowledge. Like I said, just an acknowledgement of, hey, we're not going by this. We're not going by that. This is our own unique story with a different take on everything you've seen before. And the plot twist at the end, I thought was awesome. The difference at the end of, wow, the ending was pretty good. The deaths of the major characters not happening like they're supposed to happen was pretty intense, and definitely, they didn't pull any punches when it comes to character death. And
did you see it coming though?
I didn't.
Really?
I didn't. I was listening. I listened to the stories in Audible because I don't have much time for reading anymore. So most of the time I'm listening on my way to and from work. But I didn't see it coming. I didn't think that they would change history that drastically.
Yeah, because it was kind of going to where it's like, well, the things are still happening just in different ways, which we've seen that before with the Legend series. But I just had this feeling from the second I pulled up this book. I'm like, yeah, they're going to kill off Huma before he does his thing, and so I kind of saw it coming. That doesn't mean that it took away from the enjoyment, but to me, it wasn't a surprise.
I guess now's a good time to say this is a spoiler discussion.
Yeah. By the way,
Right
Storm
after the big
dies.
stuff.
Storm dies.
Yeah.
Storm died again.
Mina's a god.
What?
Like, oh my god. I mean, is she anymore? I mean, who knows? This is a
No,
very,
she's
very
asleep
different.
at this point.
She,
Take a real nap.
no, she got snapped out of existence.
I mean, it seems pretty close to that's the direction that we've ended in, where literally everything that we know at this point has drastically changed. I mean, we end that novel where the Dragon Army has ostensibly been ruling Ansalon since the Third Dragon War, right? There was no cataclysm. Why Solace exists at all, I don't know, but it does apparently, and
the same people live there.
Yeah, which is so everything changed, but nothing changed. Kind of
just a few plot holes there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, here's the bottom line, I guess. Even though clearly everyone has some different, slightly different interpretation of this and may like choices or not like choices throughout the course of it, did you still enjoy the novel? I mean, is it still something that you say, this is a good Dragonlance book? What do you think, Chuck?
For going in terms of Dragonlance books, because, I mean, in terms of overall book, I mean, fantasy genre has changed so much in 40 years that this style of writing is definitely not the best style anymore. A lot of lengthy dialogues, a lot of lengthy conversations that go nowhere. For a Dragonlance book, this is still a fairly good book. I mean, it's got a plot, it's got action, movement, it's got some interesting characters, some interesting thoughts. Does it got some head scratching moments? Sure. I have a whole shelf of Dragonlance novels there I can pull out, and each one's got some head scratching stuff in there. You go like, what? Really?
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, I would, I'd recommend it to other people to read.
Yeah, to me, it felt like coming home.
Yeah.
And despite any inconsistencies, I started reading it. I'm like, I'm home again.
I think fandoms are always so sort of silly, and I'm part of them, so I'm counting myself in here too. Whereas we crave the nostalgia, and when we get it, we feel like it's deserved. But because of that, that means there's no real growth. And to Chuck's point, the style of writing is Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman from the beginning. I think they have evolved a little bit, but it's still contained within their sort of style, and the genre has grown and evolved and changed and gotten complex and really infinitely more adult, and this has stayed the same. So is that okay with us? I mean, clearly it is if we're saying that we enjoyed it, and I did enjoy it, even though I do have problems with some choices. But can we really objectively give an honest opinion if we're just feeding off of nostalgia from our youth? I don't know, John, do you have anything to say about that?
I think the nostalgia part plays the large part in it, but overall, I've always enjoyed Margaret and Tracy's books. I've enjoyed Margaret's solo books. I've enjoyed Margaret's books that she's done with other people. And I've always been like the super fanboy that Margaret and Tracy could do no wrong. Mm-hmm. And my outlook has changed with this book. Like, there's so many differences that it's got me scratching my head. Like, what the hell? I don't know. The nostalgia is there. It feels good to be back. I'm glad that this book in the series is being written. I did enjoy it, but there's just, I don't know, the blatant disregard for another legendary author whose works stand up against Weis and Hickman's. Richard Neck's Legend of Huma is probably the highest regarded book that is not written by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman.
I think it's
real recognizable.
Quick. I'm sorry, John, I interrupted.
That's fine.
I was just going to say real quick, Legend of Huma, I believe, is the only non-Weis and Hickman Dragonlance book to be a New York Times bestseller as well.
Right. So it's got the acclaim, it's got the accolades that it deserves. So it just kind of, I don't know, it felt weird that this story is so very different from a story that is very much beloved by the fans of the world that they created. Mm-hmm. That they would just ignore it.
Yeah.
I do want to, if I could, because we've talked a lot about continuity this time, but I think we're missing a few themes of the book. One of which is what happens if you have the chance to meet your heroes, and are they what you expect them to be, or are you let down?
So this is a literal story beat that they present. Are you using this as a metaphor for expectation of the new book, or are you referencing literally the characters?
The characters specifically, because I did think that was an interesting point.
I didn't think they hammered it home, though. I mean, that was the premise. I think that was like on the dust jacket or something, right? I mean, it was like, what's going to happen when you meet your heroes? And what happened was they were like, oh, they're a little different. They're still cool. So
yeah,
it wasn't really like,
I think if we had a Sturm who, from pre-War of the Lance meeting Huma, he might be let down quite a bit more.
Yeah.
But you know, Sturm had become a person very much like Huma, and
did he? Are we remembering two different Sturms here?
I mean, he died.
I could be.
I mean, he does die in the middle of the second book of Chronicles. I mean, he barely was a knight more than 2 weeks.
I would say the shadow of his heart. Oh, good.
I was most disappointed with the Sturm character in this book because he has all this knowledge he shouldn't have. He's like Sturm 40 years after his death.
That was weird. How, and I don't think that was explained very well. How the Sturm and Raceland are in the past. They should have the knowledge they had at the start of Autumn Twilight, and here they have the knowledge of their entire lives, including their deaths. You know.
Yeah, that was strange.
I still don't understand that, like the justification for it. I don't.
Great, Jim.
Apparently, when you die, you can see the future. I don't know. I thought it was cool.
Everybody dies, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did like that Raceland acknowledged his own future, and he tells Sturm, "You were right about me." How does that make you feel? You know, that whole part. I really enjoyed that part. I thought that was pretty cool. That he was able to come into grips, and you know, it made you wonder, would he change in the future if he knew what he became? You know, would he go down that dark path if, when he went back in time, if he went forward with that knowledge, you know, would he continue where he was going, or would he change it up a bit and try to avert his own destruction?
Right. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I think the entire the setup of that not being fully explained. I don't even need a good explanation. Just give me an explanation. You know, they were watching in the spirit room at the Gate of Souls, and suddenly their bodies were, or they're forced back into their bodies painfully or something. Like, give me something so that I can then understand and rationalize it. Because ultimately, this is all made up fantasy anyway. But we're trying to find logical leaps to the, you know, the sort of steps that they're presenting, and there just are none. There's so many of examples like that, where it's just like, well, this is just how it is. Why? I don't know. That's just, we're going to go in this direction. Why? I don't know. And
yeah,
because you do have so many beloved fans whom you have interacted with for so many decades, and you've shared laughs and drinks and meals and, you know, loves of stories and characters and stuff, you would think you would explain it. And I guess maybe we're just so close to it, we're not able to step back and realize that, well, yes, they're showing us that they're doing this differently strictly because it doesn't make sense. Like, do you think that there's anything in that it's so dramatically different in so many ways, nonsensical ways that we don't understand, that that's literally them telling us, no, this is different and we're doing it on purpose?
You know, I think there's different levels of fandom, quite honestly. I mean, if you look at fandoms of any property, you have some who are the Uber fans who know all these little details. You know, all of us here are Uber fans. In John's case, he's an Uber driver, but
used to be.
But you know, then you have your casual fans who are like, yeah, I love Weis and Hickman, and whenever they put out a book, I'll read it. You know, but they're not like diehard, and they're just going to enjoy it. I think you have new fans, and then you have toxic fans, of course, and those are like the certain Star Wars fans who were threatening poor Kelly Marie Tran for her portrayal of Rose in The Last Jedi. She's a wonderful lady, and she got off of Twitter because fans were just so toxic to her.
Yeah. I mean, that is that sort of overarching statement that we sort of made early on in this conversation of, let's not focus on the person. Let's definitely focus on the story or the creative works. Because there's a lot of things that just aren't justified in hating an individual for the work,
Oh yeah, like Ahmed Best, Anyway, that's Star Wars is a whole different tangent, and but there are certain things that are relatable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a scruffy looking nerfer. I get it. I'm with you on that.
Listen, my oldest daughter reads Dragonlance. She's read Chronicles and Legends, a few other of the books, and she's been reading Dragons Deceit and Fate. She had a lot of the same questions about like, how did this happen? Like, they didn't explain like why they have their memories. They didn't tell you like, how's it even possible? They only speculate on it. It's just like, okay, I have to accept the fact. So, yeah, I would put her as a new fan, and and she is questioning these things and asking me questions, and she wants me to explain it to her, and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe write Margaret a letter or Tracy a letter. That's all I can tell you to do at this point.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is egregious enough to be one of those famous Dragonlance sort of splitting points in the fan base that we've seen in the past?
So we've got Dragons of Summer Flame.
Yeah, so the Fifth Age was a huge deviation point.
That
Arguably,
was
War of Souls was a big one too for people who got into and were used to Fifth Age.
Fifth Age.
Yes.
I mean, even second edition, there was changes to canon and the land and characters and stuff in that Tales of Lance box set. So there's always been these sort of points in Dragonlance history where the fan base sort of decries change or lack of understanding or acceptance.
So you're saying with you?
Yeah.
So I mean, is this it? I mean, this is just another one. Is it intent? Do you think it's intentional? Because Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman aren't stupid humans. Like, they know exactly what they're writing. They know where they've come from. They know how passionate the fan base is. So, is this them just telling the story they want to tell? Do you think they're aware of the real huge changes?
I think we wait until book 3 to know.
Yeah.
That's my take.
Do you guys think there was any adjustment in scripts based on reaction from the fans? Do you think that ever happens with them?
It's very possible.
I don't know.
The second book has been finished for well over a year, so there's been plenty of time to go back and make adjustments. I don't know if they would. I don't know if that's, something that they're into. Because a lot of times books, they go through rewrites, just like movies go through reshoots and rewrites. So, I mean, it happens. I just don't know if it's something that they would do, especially since they're not really... They're kind of on their own. They're working through license from Wizards of the Coast. They're not working directly with Wizards of the Coast anymore to write this. So I feel like they probably feel like they have more freedom to do what they want. Wizards of the Coast has to approve things, of course, as we did hear about the stuff from the first book that had to get changed. But we didn't really hear about that for this one.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it was just kept quiet or if they just didn't have to change as much or didn't want to change as much.
I was going to say, it sounds like the third book is well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, Chris brings up an interesting comment here. He says that Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman have said that this story is something that they had to tell. Like there's just this sense of urgency. They literally went to court in order to be able to tell it and really and put it out there. So, I mean, with that in mind, what do you guys think? What is the reason, do you think, that they had to tell it, that this story? Is it just that they needed a payday? Is it, what is it? Chuck, do you have an opinion?
Boy, that's a tough one because so far the story we've been given is a lot of question marks, which is good and bad things. But I mean, unless that third book really does an amazing job, I mean, so far this story that they've told is not super useful so far. I mean, it hasn't changed anything, hasn't done anything. So, I mean, there's high, I mean, once again, the fandom was high in speculation that this book would undo parts of the history of Dragonlance that people dislike.
Right.
I don't know if he'll do it or not. I mean, I sure hope it doesn't go to everything at the end of Return of the Jedi. I mean, book 3, we get everything has a happy ending because, I mean, I know Margaret, or I know Tracy's big into the Star Wars trilogy stuff. We got Empire Strikes Back here where everything's really dark and depressing at the end of book 2. I don't know. I struggle with this trilogy. It's been a fun read, but the story.
So let's say this is a River of Time situation, and they're just doing the Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman fork of this river. And the reality is they're licensed for this trilogy. I know Margaret made a statement that she has been writing about the Raniker young woman, and she has a story that she's sort of got in her head about her, Alice. But whether or not she would be able to put it out or ever return to the trilogy again is literally, in my opinion, because I don't know, in my ignorance, I don't know if there's ever going to be another Dragonlance story at all. Do you think that there's any weight on these authors in order to make sure that they have some semblance of a conclusion at this third novel? Or do you think that they would just be like, okay, well, this is the end that we're going to stop with and not really answer any of these questions that everyone has? What do you think, Trampus?
Oh, geez. And I think my video is kind of frozen. Can you still hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
It is frozen. Let me see if I can
Weird.
refresh. But go ahead. We can't hear you.
Weird. Anyway, I don't know. I think I think they're going. I get the vibe that they're going to put it in a place to where from multiple from this story there could be multiple takes on Dragonlance, and it keeps it to where they can do their own thing if their own thing continues. But it also gives them separation from WotC, so that way WotC can have their mages of high sorcery and Weis and Hickman can have their wizards of high sorcery, and so on and so forth.
So I'm not sure what's going on with the video. It's frozen in Skype, and I'm not able to bring it over from Skype.
Yeah, I'll check on my end. I just didn't want to goof up your.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it. If you just want to like turn the video on or off, or I don't know, jump out and then jump right back in or something, it's okay. It's all good. But your audio is good. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it does seem to be a strange point in time to make that sort of a call. There, I know the D&D 5e design leads have suggested that there could be a return to Dragonlance and Planescape and Spelljammer and stuff in Ravenloft after this new edition comes out, but that's not a promise that it ever will. And so this could literally be the last products of Dragonlance that we ever get, official products. And if that's the case, why would you then create that huge split deviation and then never go back to the well? It just seems like a strange time to do that when, you could have done it 15 years ago. You could have done it 20 years ago. Why now at the end? I mean, clearly there must be another way of telling a story without completely obliterating the franchise in the process. And by obliterating, I mean ignoring a lot of it. Just sort of washing it away.
Well, we know that, they weren't fans of the Fifth Age stuff, and they were hired to do War of Souls to fix what was out there. So maybe this could be a way for them to just avoid it altogether, and have this end, before the Chaos War happens, and they try to tie it off with a pretty bow as nicely as they can. The War of the Land still happens, obviously, because that's their information, that's their story. Legend still happens because that's their story, but maybe we don't even get to the point of Summer Flame. Maybe everything changes so much because of this new timeline that we find ourselves in, that there's no way it goes to where Chaos is freed from the Grey Gem and causes the Chaos War. Because as it stands now, with as different of the world as it is, doing these alternate timelines, when you start something new, you have to be able to look forward and see what's going to change, and what's not going to be around anymore. So now that the Dragon Queen has been conquering the world since the Third Dragon War, will events for the Summer of Chaos ever line up to happen? And my guess would be no, because everything's so different right now. The things that had to happen for that story will never happen now, just because that's how time works. Well, maybe that's not how time works.
I was gonna say, this trilogy did answer one question though that everybody had for at least since 1996, 5-ish. How did the Grey Gem get cracked?
Oh,
right, yeah.
Just a little chaos escaped.
Just a wee bit.
I mean, that was always the thing when you first read that book, is that it starts off with the Grey Gem's been cracked, and it's like, well, how did that happen? That happened off screen somewhere.
Yeah, and they did answer. How did the Dragon Orb get to the Tower of High Sorcery? I enjoyed that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I disliked the most about the actual story, that made the least amount of sense to me, was that as they're back, 1,400 years in the past, making changes, that the present day to what they should be hasn't caught up yet.
right.
Why is that not an instantaneous? As soon as something happens 1,400 years ago, that present never would never
They explain that though. Dalamar and
weak.
Jasterius.
That was the weakest thing. Oh, time needs time to catch up. No, it doesn't.
But at least they
Why?
give some sort of explanation though. Unlike 70% of the stuff, at least they tried to explain that.
I think they just wanted to feature Dalamar more, which is fine because I love Dalamar as a character. So I'm not mad that he has.
So grateful that he didn't just, show those damn fingerprints again. It's like,
not once. Not once.
God, he
wanted to.
Oh, he wants to. Like every conversation, he's like, "How can I shoehorn this in?"
Right. Hey, Alice.
Did you talk about my robe? Would you? Do I have a mark here? Let me.
This thing is so itchy,
It's like the Hulk Hogan of Dragonlance.
Oh yeah.
Let me tell you something, brother. I've got these marks.
That would be a whole different character if his voice was like Hulk Hogan.
That would be great.
Everything would be different about my interpretation of him.
I'll never see him the same again. I'm
For
sorry.
Sure. Hey, lady, thanks for tuning in live in the chat here. So I mean, really, when we're talking about all these changes and stuff, it is in anticipation for answers, right? I mean, that is literally all we want. What's the over-under? What percentage-wise? What do you think is the chance that we're going to be satisfied at the end of the next novel?
We're Dragonlance fans. We'll never be satisfied.
Can't get no satisfaction. I don't know, Chuck. Is there a possibility that you could see that you would be okay? They explained this and that, and that's enough. Okay, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, if they explain some of the big things, like as long as they don't Newhart it, for once again showing my age, where it's all just been a dream at the end.
Yep.
Like I'll be okay if they throw out some explanations of what how this happened. You know, give me some summaries of, like, even in an appendix. Like it doesn't have to be in the story. You can throw in something into the book of, like, hey, here's some more author notes of how this came about.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be fine for me.
And what about you, John?
I mean, it's definitely it's intrigued me enough that I think that the story, you know, the story could stand up. I just have to forget that I read The Legend of Huma first. Like I said, the story in itself.
You need therapy for this?
I do.
I think
I'll be seeing a doctor later this week. But all in all, like, it tells the story of Magius and Huma, and, you know, a lot of people, because there's a lot of people out there that haven't read The Legend of Huma, and they're now getting this historic look at characters that they probably never, you know, would have thought that they'd be able to read about. Mm-hmm. So the fact they're now getting these characters in a main story is probably mind-blowing to them in a very positive way. So I think they can pull it out. I think that, you know, they're good at what they do. Okay, Margaret and Tracy are experts at writing Dragonlance fiction. So I think that if anyone can save it from itself, it's them. And I hope that this has all been some sort of setup to, you know, The Last Jedi us, you know, get everybody all angry and questioning and pointing fingers and just questioning mostly, and trying to, and then they're going to give us hopefully a better resolution than The Rise of Skywalker.
Right.
I'm just waiting for someone to throw a Dragonlance over their shoulder. So let's see. I think there are going to be some fans that are going to enjoy it no matter what. You know, the Weis and Hickman fanboys will love it. I think overall it'll be good, but you know, if I'm being honest, fans are a divisive lot at times, and there are going to be some folks who will never be pleased with it, as happens every major trilogy. There's going to be some folks who will question it, and I don't know. Overall, I think it'll be good. I think it'll be enjoyable, and I'm very much hoping there's some twist at the end, you know, something that none of us saw coming. But we'll see.
Yeah, I can't imagine that they would use the third book to explain the second. Just from a narrative standpoint, you may have some events that do explain it, but to go through sort of step by step and try to then, you know, say, well, the reason why that is like that in that book is because of this, you know, weird, I don't know, quantum time leap thing, and because this is that, and this is here, and that's there, and, you know, we're gonna all set it all back and everything, and then now everyone's fine and happy, and, you know, here's the world that we live in, and everyone loves it together. I think you're absolutely right, Trampus, when you say that the fandom is divisive, and it's always been, and no one's ever happy. I mean, every single trilogy they've put out after Legends, or novel they've put out in the Dragonlance canon, has been divisive. I mean, every single one. So, and arguably even the Legends and Chronicles were. And so if that's the starting point, where no matter what, not everyone is gonna be happy, then they're just telling the story that they want to tell because they can't cater to a group that can't be happy. So if they're just telling the story that they want to tell, I think that does then inform us where they're probably going to end it, and that is where they're happy. And we know they love the companions. They love Raceland more than I think anyone ever has a healthy need to, for some reason.
Raceland and Tass.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like at this point, that seems to be the only reason that second book was written, was just so we could talk about Raceland some more. But like, really, I don't think anyone, to your point, I don't think anyone's going to be 100% happy. And so if we're not 100%, then what's the percentage that you're going to be at where you're like, okay, well, at least I didn't waste my money and time. At least I've got X percent. And I think, if I can get 50% out of a Dragonlance book of enjoyment, then I'm okay with that. Because let's be honest, these books are not prime adult fiction. These are for young adults, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys disagree with that or not. These were never meant to be consumed by full-grown humans. I mean, do you guys think, am I wrong with that?
Not at all.
So we just kind of have to look at the target audience and realize that, like Star Wars, we've aged out of it. I still love it, but Star Wars was built for 8 to 12-year-old boys, like little kids. So,
My wife calls me a 12-year-old boy sometimes.
I'm at least a 16-year-old, so my wife at least makes me feel a little bit older than hers.
Nice.
Yeah, no comment on my part.
So I don't know. Do you guys have any sort of closing comments about the fandom or the story or the authors or anything like that before we sort of wrap up our conversation? Okay, then.
I don't know. I just want to say give it a chance.
Yeah.
And I know I'm the Weis and Hickman apologist for the group. I recognize that. I wear that and wear it with pride. And, it's also a little difficult for me because these people who have been my heroes, well, to follow a theme, I guess, who have been my heroes, I've come to call them friend. Mm-hmm. And so, getting to know Margaret and Tracy gives me a certain insight on this. But I learned a good lesson years ago from a good friend of mine, and that is sometimes don't approach things from an overly critical perspective. Sometimes just sit back and enjoy the ride. And yeah, you can say there's all these inconsistencies, and there are. I'm not going to deny that. But ask yourself in the end, did I enjoy it anyway? Did those inconsistencies take away from the story that you're reading? And try to base it on the product that it is and not necessarily compare it to someone else.
Yeah, or what you expected it to be.
And that's always a tough one right there because, the Star Wars sequels, people expected a certain thing. And when it wasn't that, they're disappointed. And same thing with the Star Wars prequels. So,
right.
Right.
Anyone else have anything to say?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It didn't hit on all cylinders because of reasons that we've already beat into the ground. But it's a new Dragonlance book. It's a new book from Margaret and Tracy. Over the years, I've met them both several times. We had a dinner several years ago at Gen Con that Margaret and Cam, a bunch of the MWP people came to, and Margaret sat directly across from me. Like, that's just where her seat ended up being. I was just like fanboying out the whole time. I love Margaret. I love Tracy. And I never won't. And I'll always support their work. So I'm hoping that the third book will answer some things. And I've heard that this book is better the second time around. So once I finish with the books I'm currently doing, I'll go back and I'll check it out again. So and maybe I'll read it this time instead of listening to it. That might have a different effect by reading it instead of listening to an audio book version.
It did for me.
So I'm looking forward to it.
I just want to know the audiobook version because I'm listening to it after I read it. I thought they gave the authors gave notes of pronunciations of names.
Yeah, I did too.
You know, I thought so too.
It's just constant too. I'm like, oh, there's so many things that are just said wrong here that.
Well, we've never had a good guide on how names are pronounced in Dragonlance. The only thing we had was in Holy Orders of the Stars, where they went into the gods' names, and even at that, some of them are pronounced different ways.
Well, in WotC, though, when they do the other audiobooks, they'll a lot of times include the authors to, like Ed Greenwood helps with the names, make sure everybody's saying them right. The way he at least says them, and which helps. Here, it's definitely not. This is the one book that you got Magere, and before they've always said Magir in the other audiobooks.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, Tracy Hickman did straight up say on camera that he was asked by them to send pronunciations, and he did send it. So, but that was for the first Dragons of the Seat. So maybe it just didn't get past to this narrator. I don't know. But
I was
it
surprised.
adds to the inconsistencies and problems, especially with us insane fans. Because I get flack every day from videos about me saying stuff wrong. And they're like, I love the video. You did such a great job, except for you saying this. And this is how you say it. How dare you change it? I'm just like, all right, man. Well, thanks for watching.
I've noticed this for years, like with the podcast, you know, we talk about all these different names and how one of us will say one word one way and another say another way. And, you know, like I listen to your videos, I hear different words different ways. And it's like, that's just how you do it. And meanwhile, Weis and Hickman are there just saying, you know, how's it pronounced? However you think it's pronounced.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a big deal to them.
Right. Because they say it's Bapu, and that doesn't make any sense to me.
And Huma, you know, and see, I always said Huma because it's like human, but they always say Huma. But I tell you, the one that got me was when I first heard Margaret Weis say Mishakel, because that's the way I say it. But she says Mishakel. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, that's pretty rough for me. But what do you? I don't care. I mean, you know, there's regional dialects change for regular words, so why not for these? You know, why would this be any different? I don't really care about when it comes to pronunciations and stuff. It's the core of the setting that I appreciate, and the shared camaraderie through that. You know, I think is a lot of fun. Well, speaking of that, you guys over at Dragonlance Nexus have a lot going on. So, do you want to throw out anything that you got in the pipeline?
Yeah, I can touch on a couple things. Tim's been working on a conversion of Dragonlance 1 through 5 called Autumn Twilight. That will be dropping in October on DM's Guild. That will just be a conversion kit for the first 5 modules. Running them in 5th edition. Megan's Shadows of a... Oh boy, I should have wrote that one down.
Black Rose.
Shadow of the Black Rose. I always want to say Fallen Rose, and I'm like, that's not right. Shadows of the Fallen Rose, that's going to go to hardcover print on demand or soft cover. And that should be out shortly on DM's Guild. We're finishing up our Rich and Knack project with Richard. Hopefully we have that out around Thanksgiving time. We're working on a source book for Champions of Krynn / the next couple parts of that. That should be out January, February.
Jeez.
And we're going to GaryCon, so.
Yeah, and the funny thing is beyond all that, there are other projects that a lot of us have in mind. You know, Megan's got ideas, I've got ideas, and I'm certain we all do. And we're just having fun. You know, we're doing Dragonlance our way, and I hope that our years of devotion and our love of Dragonlance shows through, and we just appreciate the fans and the support, and thank you all.
Yeah. Well, I think if there could be a sort of an old school group of individuals that have kept that flame, it is definitely you guys throughout, all the different, all the myriad of years that we've gone through, whether it's feast or famine with Dragonlance content, you guys have been the one consistency. So thanks for doing that. And of course, moving in and, further developing stuff for newer generations of players and newer systems, I think is incredibly important because that just keeps Dragonlance in the zeitgeist, and that's always a good thing in my opinion. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining me for this conversation. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we could do it again sometime in the future.
Definitely.
Yeah, we got another book coming
Definitely.
out.
Yeah, that's true. All right, everyone. Thank you guys so much for tuning in live in chat. We appreciate you. Of course, if you're watching this after the fact, let us know in the comments what you thought of Dragons of Fate or any of the conversation points that we hit on today. We'd love to hear from you. Of course, Dragonlance Nexus does have a YouTube channel. You can go check them out there as well, and then check out their website and everything they're putting up on DM's Guild. That is going to do it for today's Hangout. I hope you guys have a fantastic afternoon, and until next time, Slán Javar.